Alright, let's begin. So for this video, we're going to be covering UI, the canvases, and how they are all managed. So as you can see here, we have a canvas of 3 different components. We have a held button over here. We have radio buttons to the side, which all are having their proper calls done in the comments. And then also we have a slider here. This slider is submitted by groove, so it will clamp to the nearest groove. If I were to set this to the maximum groove, then I have it set up so I will submit a second canvas to the scene. So as you can see here, we have a held button over here and a push button right over here. If I were to set this slider all the way back down to 0, you can see that they are currently deregistered. So if I were to just press this a bit to clear out the trace log, we saw that the push button was over here, but as I'm pushing here, it is no longer registered, so it doesn't exist. It is only when I set this back to 100 that we have the slider again. Alright. So to discuss how this works, so UI is the base class for all my components. This is what everything derives from, and this is how we connect things to the canvas so that they can receive updates from the manager. So there are some base things that you can do, such as setting the position, offset, and updating the text. And then there are 4 update calls for updating the UI every frame, checking if the UI has been pressed, checking if the UI is currently held down, or checking if the UI is released. I will cover each of these in more depth when we get to the specific UI components, but these are the callbacks that are used to have all the UI do what they need to do. There's also a connect to canvas and disconnect to canvas for UI components. This is for if the user wants to define anything. So for instance, for the slider, I have on connect to canvas, I register for updatables so that I can print out the current percentage of the slider every frame. So that is their way of connecting to the canvas and disconnecting from the canvas. And then that is everything. So then the canvas entry and exit, this is the registry and deregistry for the UI components. This is where we will actually connect them to the canvas and then call that user-defined connect and disconnect. All UI and canvases use delayed registration similar to any other game object or exable. So they have registration requests that will then use an attorney to pass through to the scene the necessary steps. So here we have everything to add it to the canvas, which is passing all the way through the attorney for the kitchen to go to the canvas. So for canvases, they have their own registration that they need to do to connect themselves to the manager. They themselves are composed of a list of UI components. Once per frame, if a canvas is registered to the scene, then it will loop through all the active components. Based on the mouse input that they received from the manager, they will loop through their components and determine if they need to call check press, check down, or check release. And then every frame they will call check update. This is mainly used for the check button group and the push buttons because they have things that need to happen either every frame or immediately the next frame. So for every other UI component, they do not overwrite this. This is just a no-op. It is particularly for the check button group and the push buttons. To cover canvases a bit more in depth, they are a collection of multiple different UI components. You can either submit their registry immediately, or as I showed with the other test canvas here, this is only submitted to registry when our slider says that they need it to be connected. The UIManager, whenever the UI canvas does a registration request, it has its delayed registration via the scene. Oh, wrong one. Via the scene, using the attorney to pass it all through. So the UI has the same exact thing as well. Once we register it to the scene properly, the UIManager will then set its position inside a list of active canvases and then call initialize on that canvas. This initialize is where you can submit entry for all your UI components as well as update any parameters you wish to update. Then whenever you deregister, it calls the canvas remove, which is where you can submit exit for all your components. You create your components in the constructor of the canvas and then delete them in the destructor of the canvas. This way you can submit the canvas to enter and exit the scene multiple times without creating and deleting multiple times unnecessarily. So the bounce back to the manager. The UIManager inside the scene call, they have the registration deregistration, but more importantly, during the update stage, they will process all of their elements. So during that process element call, it will loop through all of its active canvases, determine what the mouse state is for the canvas. When it determines if the mouse is pressed down, release, or up, it will loop through all of its active canvases, and via another attorney, it will pass through the update UI call to that individual canvas. So the manager will figure out the mouse state as well as the mouse position, tell that to all of its UI component, all of its canvases, and then the UI component will then receive from that canvas what they need to do, be it press, down, or release, all of which pass through the UI manager. And that is it.